The sun hung low in the sky as Sarah ran through the dusty road, her heart pounding like a wild drum. She left behind the town that had been her home, but now felt more like a prison. The familiar houses turned into shadows as she dashed past, each one whispering secrets she wished to leave behind. Sarah had spent years trapped in a cycle of expectations and disappointments. It was a small town where everyone knew everyone, and every mistake felt magnified. The weight of judgment was heavy on her shoulders, but today felt different. Today, she was breaking free. As she ran, her mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. Pregnant with hope, she envisioned a life untouched by the small-town grind, a place where she could be herself, where nobody would weigh her down with their opinions. The idea fueled her speed, pushing her forward, but freedom didn't come easy. Behind her, the sounds of shouts and angry footsteps echoed, growing louder, fueled by panic and betrayal. She had made her choice, but it hadn't been easy. With each footfall, she felt the town's pull, a desperate attempt to drag her back, and then she saw him. A figure appeared by the old iron gate at the edge of town. He stood tall, shadows draping over him as the sun began to set. It was the kind of gate that held magic, a boundary between the familiar and the unknown. It was the last obstacle she needed to cross. His name was Daniel, a familiar face, but one she hadn't fully noticed until that moment. He was a quiet type, someone who blended into the background, always observing but rarely participating. Sarah had grown up alongside him, sharing classrooms, books, and even the occasional bus ride. They hadn't exchanged many words, just casual smiles and nods, but somehow he always felt different. He called out, his voice slicing through the air. It was a command laced with urgency. For a moment, Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to stop, not now, but the worry in his voice halted her flight, and she slowed down, panting, the weight of her decision crashing over her. As she reached the gate, she glanced at him. His eyes were wide, searching her face for answers, for guidance, maybe even for justification. Daniel's question hung between them, raw and vulnerable. "I have to go," she managed to breathe out, a mix of fear and resolve bubbling in her chest. He shook his head slightly, as if trying to understand the gravity of her words. "Why?" She glanced back towards the town, her old life closing in around her, and turned back to him. "I'm running from everything." He nodded slowly, as if he was beginning to grasp her need for escape. Daniel had always been introspective, the kind of person who observed rather than judged. "There's a whole world out there," he said softly, stepping closer to the gate. His question hung in the air, prickling her skin. It felt harsh, but the truth was there in his eyes. Was she just running from her problems, or was this a chance to find herself? She felt the tension wrap around them, a web spun from their shared history. "They won't let me leave," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper now. He looked back toward the town, weighing the distance they had both traveled. The reality was clear. It wasn't just her past she was fleeing, it was his too. While Sarah felt the weight of her choices, she could sense his internal struggle, recognizing his own battles reflected in her flight. Daniel stood tall by the gate, a pillar of strength. "You don't have to do this alone." His words struck deep. What if he was right? What if she didn't need to flee? The idea hovered like morning mist, uncertain yet tantalizing. "I thought running was my only option," she admitted, the tears she fought against pooling in her eyes. Daniel reached out, his hand barely brushing the top of the gate. What if we opened it together? That was a moment frozen in time. They were no longer just two people standing by a gate. They were on the brink of a new chapter. Could this be a moment to face their pasts together? She hesitated, uncertainty gnawing at her, but there was something comforting about his presence. It was a connection, a thread woven through their years of quiet exchanges. Daniel smiled softly, and there was something brimming with understanding in his eyes. "That's okay." She felt her resolve begin to waver. It was strange, feeling supported in a place where she had always felt alone. For the first time, she realized that running didn't have to be a solitary journey. "Together, we can face anything," he promised quietly. As those words settled in her heart, Sarah made her choice. She took a deep breath, and together they pushed against the heavy gate. The creaking hinges echoed in the twilight, a haunting sound that symbolized both the end of her escape and the start of something new. Once they opened the gate, the world beyond was different from what she had imagined. It wasn't a hollow void, it was alive with possibility. The colors were brighter, and the wind carried the scent of adventure. Sarah turned back to the town one last time. A part of her wanted to scream at it for all the pain it caused, all the walls it built around her. But another part, a glimmer of gratitude, recognized the lessons learned along the way. She had grown through her struggles, and now she had Daniel by her side. "Let's go," she said, feeling the adrenaline surge through her. They stepped through together, leaving the town behind, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. With each step, the weight began to lift. The burden of expectations vanished, replaced by the thrill of freedom. The road stretched far ahead, winding into the unknown. Hours passed, and the dusky twilight turned into night. The stars began to twinkle above them, a blanket of dreams and futures yet to be written. She could feel the excitement bubbling up inside her. Behind them faded the angry voices, replaced by the silence of the open road. Daniel asked, breaking the silence as they walked side by side. "Everything," Sarah replied, a newfound joy touching her heart. He chuckled softly, a sound that sent warmth radiating through her. Nothing can be a good thing. They strolled along, letting their footprints mark the path ahead. Each step felt lighter, as if they were casting off the weight of the past. Sarah could now see that they had a choice. They could either carry the burdens of their old lives or let go and begin anew. Sarah asked, curiosity coloring her words. Daniel paused for a moment, his face thoughtful. I always imagine the mountains, where the air is fresh and the sky feels endless. Anywhere but here, she said, then added, I want to feel alive. Let's do that, he said, his eyes gleaming with a spark of excitement. Together, they created a vision, a dream that could flourish like the flowers along their journey. Maybe the small-town struggles would always be a part of them, but they had taken steps to unearth the weight that had kept them stagnant for so long. Hours turned into days as they walked, discovering pieces of themselves that had been lost. The more they traveled, the closer they became. They shared stories, laughter, and even fears. Sarah learned that he too had felt the pull of the town. He had struggled with expectations, the constant pressure to conform. But now, as they moved forward, something beautiful was unfolding. With Daniel beside her, she felt emboldened. They cheered each other on, both becoming the support they had longed for. The connection deepened, and with every sunset painted on the horizon, Sarah began to realize it wasn't just about escaping. It was also about discovering who she was meant to be. She was no longer running from something, but toward everything she could become. And together, they faced each new challenge. Whenever they stumbled, they reached for one another, grasping hands, feeling the warmth of love growing in the spaces between them. Bulky shadows of the past lingered, but they learned how to navigate them, a trail of resilience lit by hope. Days turned into months, and the road became a journey of self-discovery interlaced with moments of pure happiness. With Daniel beside her, Sarah found what she had been searching for all along. It wasn't just freedom, it was acceptance, companionship, and a place to belong. One crisp morning, they stood atop a hill, gazing at a sunrise that painted the sky with shades of orange and pink. Sarah breathed deeply, the air filling her lungs with promise. She asked softly, a mix of excitement and trepidation swirling inside her. Daniel looked at her, his eyes warm with understanding. Wherever the wind takes us, he said, and in that moment Sarah understood the power of choice, of opening a gate to a new life. She smiled, heart soaring with hope and love. Together they stepped forward into the dawn, ready to embrace the endless possibilities that awaited. Sarah shouted, her voice breaking through the stillness of the night, echoing off the distant hills. Just moments before, she had been running through the twisted streets of her small town, heart racing, lungs burning with desperation. But now, standing at the edge of town with nothing but darkness ahead, she felt a flicker of doubt. Against the backdrop of a fading sky, an old iron gate loomed before her, a relic from years gone by. It was rusted and cracked, and in that moment felt like the very threshold between her past and the uncertain freedom that awaited her. The lights of the town flickered behind her like stars dimming in the early dawn. She could hear the muffled voices, the frantic shouts of friends turned enemies, or maybe enemies turned friends. It didn't matter now. All that mattered was this gate standing solitary against the tide of her past. Just then, a figure appeared on the other side, emerging from the shadows. It was Daniel, tall, with tousled hair, a face she recognized but never truly noticed until now. He stood there, framed by the fading light like a guardian of some untold story. Sarah, he called, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling behind her. Her heart thudded, caught between the pulse of fear and the flicker of something profound, something she didn't yet understand. She had always thought of him as the quiet one, content to blend into the background, but tonight he dared to step into the light. She yelled again, the weight of her decision pulling at her very soul. His words hung heavy in the air, demanding something more than just flight. It's a question that echoed through the nights of their shared history, what lay behind the walls of the town they both knew too well. Sarah shouted, her voice trembling now, revealing the crack in her armor. The truth spilled out, unfiltered and raw. Running had never been just about escaping. It was about discovering freedom, clarity, and the strength to be who she truly was. For a fleeting moment, an understanding passed between them, a silent recognition of shared pain. Daniel stepped closer to the gate, the iron creaking as he pushed against it. Then, let's open this together. She paused, uncertainty clawing at her. Could this seemingly simple act of opening a gate be the key to unshackling the chains that had bound her to the town? Her heart raced as she weighed the options. Behind her, the life she was fleeing still clung tightly, suffocating and constraining. But standing before her was this boy-man, really, who offered a flicker of companionship through the darkness. She repeated, testing the words as if they could change the fabric of reality. Yes, together, he affirmed, a quiet strength lacing his voice. You're not just running away, you're running towards something, towards yourself. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Sarah felt something shift within her. She had spent years unsure, her heart a battleground of expectations versus dreams. And here was Daniel offering something more than himself. He was offering a solidarity she hadn't dared to hope for. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, her fingers grazing the cold, rusted iron of the gate. Together they pushed, the gate groaning as if to protest against the years of neglect. Finally, with a loud creak, it swung open, revealing a world painted in deep blues and velvety darkness. She whispered, fear creeping back in like unwelcome shadows. Daniel met her gaze, unwavering. Then we'll face them together, just like we are now. The moment hung between them, magical and fragile. They stood on the cusp of both uncertainty and possibility, tethered to each other by an unspoken vow that had begun to bind their fates. As they stepped through the gate, Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her, the very air around her crackling with anticipation. It didn't matter what lay ahead. In that instant, with Daniel by her side, she felt alive. Once in the open air, they began to walk, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravel path that wound away from everything they had ever known. The scenery transformed, wild and untamed, a mixture of tall grasses swaying in the wind and distant trees standing like sentinels under a canopy of stars. She asked, the moon illuminating her thoughtful expression. I think we'll discover parts of ourselves we never knew were missing, he replied, a hint of a smile easing the tension between them. They talked as they walked, sharing dreams and fears, realizing how little they had truly known about each other. With every passing moment, the weight of their past began to lift. The struggle against conformity and the expectations that once seemed insurmountable faded into the background. Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. Every day, Daniel replied, the seriousness in his gaze solidifying the bond that had formed between them. I just didn't know how to escape, how to break free from the shackles of what everyone else expected. It was more than just a journey for Sarah. It was a journey of understanding of self and of love blossoming in the most unexpected of places. Their conversation ebbed and flowed, filled with laughter and moments of deep silence where words weren't necessary. Look, Daniel said suddenly, pointing toward the skies. Above them, constellations twinkled like diamond dust, vibrant and mysterious. Wow, Sarah breathed, feeling small yet significant under the vastness of the universe. I've never really looked at the stars before. He turned to her, his expression serious but soft. They've always been there, just like you've been here. She smiled at his words, feeling a connection that went beyond their shared histories. There was something wondrous in this moment, the echoes of their childhood fears slowly dissolving, replaced by the tender realization that they could redefine their lives. But as they walked deeper into the night, a sudden rustle behind them sent a chill down her spine. She stumbled slightly, gripping Daniel's arm like a lifeline. Probably just an animal, he said, though his voice was tinged with uncertainty. Yet they both knew what lay behind them, the voices, the anger, those shadows were gaining ground on them. Maybe we should hurry, Sarah suggested, urgency creeping into her tone. Agreed, Daniel replied, resolutely setting his pace faster. The sharp sound of distant shouting broke through the tranquility and panic clawed at her heart. She gasped, her breath quickening. The fear of being caught, of losing the precious moment of escape, gripped her tightly. Focus on my voice, he said, now moving beside her, urging her forward. Keep your eyes ahead. With those words, Sarah found her rhythm, adrenaline surging through her veins. They kept running, pushing the limits of their bodies, ignoring the fatigue that threatened to slow them down. Behind them, the urgency of their past clanged like a distant bell, but they soon found the path winding uphill, away from the town's reach. She asked as they reached a flat spot, her lungs raw, every breath labored. Daniel paused, looking into the distance. Eventually. The determination in his voice sparked something within her, a burning hope that ignited with each step. And go they did, fueled by sheer will and the thrill of defying what was expected of them. Each stride felt like a declaration of independence, and as they climbed higher, the rhythm of their hearts began to sink. The night air was brisk, but the adrenaline coursed through them like fire. They were escaping more than just the physical bounds of the town. They were shedding layers of doubt, anonymity, and fear. Finally, they reached a clearing that opened up to a breathtaking vista. The moon cast a silver hue over the landscape, illuminating hills that seemed to roll endlessly into the horizon. In that stillness, they stopped, panting, letting the beauty wash over them. Yeah, Daniel agreed, a smile spreading across his face as he looked at her. We're free now. The enormity of their choice washed over her. Though the night felt heavy with uncertainty, it also brimmed with potential. They had walked away from the town together, and what they found in this expanse was theirs to shape. With a newfound sense of purpose, Sarah turned to him, vulnerability mingling with excitement. Daniel arched an eyebrow. Yeah, his laughter rang out, filled with dreams of possibility. I do. For the first time, I see a future that's ours alone. Daniel stepped closer, their hands brushing. The connection ignited something powerful, a sense of belonging that had always evaded her. You're right. As the conversation turned toward dreams of new beginnings, the shadows of the past lingered, but they felt lighter, now manageable. Together, they were pushing against what had once seemed so heavily shackled, taking ownership of their stories and weaving their own paths into the vast tapestry of life that lay ahead. With the dawning of a new day just beyond the horizon, Sarah realized this journey was more than just about running from the town. It was about running towards something extraordinary. This was the beginning of endless possibilities. She looked into Daniel's eyes, that quiet boy who had suddenly become her anchor, and knew that whatever awaited them on the other side of this night, they would face it hand in hand. As dawn broke, they stood side by side, breathing in the freshness of a world untamed. Together they opened their hearts to the light, ready to step boldly into whatever lay beyond, where dreams awaited, ready to take flight. Sarah's voice rang out, fierce and desperate, as she sprinted down the cracked pavement of Maplewood Avenue. Behind her, the sounds of laughter and confusion faded into angry shouts, grasping at her as if the town itself was pulling her back. Not today. She had made her choice. The stars blinked above, indifferent to the chaos brewing beneath them. With each step, Sarah felt the weight of her childhood decisions made for her, dreams buried beneath the expectations of small-town life. The shadows of her past danced at the corners of her vision, but she had only one focus now: freedom. Ahead, the old iron gate appeared, its silhouette dark against the night sky. It had always been a boundary, a separator between the familiar and the unknown. The rusted metal spoke of places left unexplored, adventures yet to be had. And she had spent far too long inside those familiar walls. As she approached, she heard a voice cutting through the aircom, steady. It took a moment for her to process who it was. Daniel, the boy from her high school who had always seemed more like a shadow, an extra in the background of her life. She skidded to a stop, heart pounding. She eyed him suspiciously, breathless, emotions tangled and raw. He hesitated, glancing back toward the noise, then stepped forward. His words hung in the air, laced with sincerity. It struck her differently than she expected. Could he really understand? Help, Daniel shrugged, a small smirk playing on his lips, trying to lighten the mood. His question made her hesitate, did she? There was a part of her that craved the thrill of the unknown, but she couldn't deny the fear gnawing at her insides. She simply wanted to escape the life that felt like a cage. Then he stepped closer to the gate, a silent invitation wrapped in courage. Look, I get it, this town. His words resonated deeply, igniting something within her. She saw in his eyes an understanding, a recognition of a shared struggle. They had both felt caged by the small-town life, both wanting something more. Maybe he wouldn't be just an onlooker. What are you doing here, Daniel? I care because I see you, he said, his voice steady as a heartbeat. You're not just another person in this town. The sincerity in his voice beckoned to her, stirring memories of their childhood. They shared classrooms, exchanged shy smiles in hallways, and yet she had always overlooked him. Now something shifted in her perception. He tilted his head, the moonlight highlighting the determination in his gaze. Because I'm not asking you to stay, I'm asking you to move forward. Something within her unlocked. It was crazy, reckless even, but there was magic in the moment, a chance to rewrite her narrative. She repeated, her voice softer now. Yeah, he said, nodding. Let's see what's out there. The night air crackled with anticipation. Suddenly, the echo of the angry voices from town became distant, nearly drowned out by the pounding of her heart. She weighed her options, the thrill of possibility dancing dangerously in her gut. What lay beyond the gate? It could be terrifying or liberating, but standing with Daniel, she felt a flicker of bravery. Okay, she said, her voice firm. With that, they shared a determined look, drawing strength from each other as they pushed against the gate. It made a loud creak, almost as if it were protesting the entrance of two brave souls. The barrier between their old lives and the unexplored world began to shift, a tangible thing imbued with possibility. As the gate swung wide, Sarah felt a rush of emotion, a blend of anxiety and exhilaration. They stepped through together, leaving the town behind, leaving the remnants of her past where they belonged in the shadows. The field beyond was dotted with wildflowers, and under the starry expanse above, it felt alive and breathing. The cool night air wrapped around them, embracing their liberation. They had crossed a threshold, but deep down, she sensed that the hardest part was just beginning. Daniel asked, scanning the landscape. Anywhere but here, she replied. With each step, the embrace of freedom ignited a fire inside her. The world opened up like a book she had yet to read. But the uncertainty loomed, sharp and real, as they began to walk, the town slowly fading into darkness behind them. As they ventured deeper, silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the distant sounds of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Daniel asked, glancing sideways at her. She laughed, a soft sound of disbelief at their own recklessness. I've been so afraid to leave. He nodded. His words hit her like a revelation. She had let fear dictate her life for too long, the tether of expectations holding her back. What about you? Daniel paused, his expression shifting into something more serious. I've felt invisible here, he admitted. The quieter you are, the easier it is for people to overlook you, but I want to be seen. As she listened, Sarah began to understand his quietness was not weakness but strength, a choice, and the recognition that they were both seeking their place in the world deepened their bond. You matter to me, she said softly, and the moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken emotion. Daniel met her gaze, his eyes brightening. She could feel the warmth spreading through her, brightening her heart like a beacon. In that moment, they weren't just two individuals fleeing a town, they were two people on a journey toward healing and self-discovery. But as they walked, shadows of doubt began to creep in again. Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The possibility of being dragged back was more than she could bear. They might, Daniel replied, his tone thoughtful. She felt the truth in his words, the wisdom of someone who had been navigating this maze of life alongside her, even if silently. The thoughts swirled as they walked further into the night. Whether it was courage or recklessness, they were committed now. As dawn approached, painting the horizon with soft pinks and purples, an undeniable weight settled over her. She asked, her voice trembling. "Then we figure it out," Daniel said simply. They continued, tracking the sunrise, casting dreams against the vibrant colors that unfurled before them. With each step, they embraced the unknown, leaving bits of fear behind like faded leaves. They found themselves at the edge of a forest, the trees standing tall and majestic like guardians waiting to welcome them into their embrace. "This place feels different," Sarah commented, looking up at the towering trees swaying gently in the breeze. "It does," Daniel agreed. "It feels alive." They ventured deeper, sunlight filtering through the leaves, creating a play of shadows and light that danced around them. The air smelled fresh and sweet, a stark contrast to the stale atmosphere of their town. "This is amazing," Sarah said, breathing in the beauty surrounding them. "Neither did I," Daniel replied, a smile spreading across his face. As they navigated the winding paths through the forest, laughter echoed between them. Began to make up stories about the trees, their secret lives, adventures they might have had. She felt weight lifting, their shared laughter replacing the burdens of the past. But that joy was disrupted by the sharp sound of branches snapping behind them. Panic clutched at her throat. Sarah's voice was only a whisper. "Let's keep moving," Daniel urged, his voice steady yet firm. They hurried down the path, hearts racing as the forest seemed to close in around them, shadows stretching and flickering in the dim light. "It's probably just a deer or something," Daniel reassured her, but they both knew the truth. The past had a way of creeping in when you least expected it. Fear danced between them like a ghost, but they pressed forward, united against the unseen threats lurking behind them. Her heart raced, but so did her determination. They were forging a new path, a fragile thread of hope strung between them, and she refused to let fear snuff it out. They stumbled into a clearing, a sunlit glade where daisies waved in the gentle breeze. It felt almost sacred, a sanctuary carved from the chaos of their lives. "Wow," Sarah breathed, feeling the warmth of sunlight envelop them like a protective blanket. Daniel smiled, taking a moment to breathe it all in. "This is what we were running toward," he said, his eyes sparkling with wonder. The weight of the world seemed to lift for a moment, but then the creeping thoughts of what lay behind her crashed in. "But what if they don't let us go? Then we face it together," he responded, stepping closer. "You're not alone anymore." His strength washed over her, calming the storm brewing inside. In that moment, Sarah realized they were both rebuilding. They weren't just fleeing, they were transforming their lives, finding strength in vulnerability, solace in partnership. As they stood together in the glade, feeling the softness of the grass under their feet, an unshakable truth settled in. Their lives were now intertwined, and neither would sever that bond. With renewed determination, they took a moment to breathe it all in, the sunlight streaming through the trees, the sound of nature humming around them. The chaos of their old lives slowly began to fade into a distant memory. In that beautiful glade, Sarah looked at Daniel, and for the first time she felt seen, not just as the girl from town, but as a person filled with dreams and aspirations. "Thank you for coming with me," she said, her voice steady now. "Thank you for trusting me," he replied, an honest warmth in his gaze. As they stood there amidst the daisies, the past felt less like chains binding them down and more like threads weaving their story together, one of courage, chance, and hope. And in that moment, as the sun began to rise fully, they made a pact, not just to embrace the unpredictability of the world beyond, but to welcome it with open arms. Together, they would pave the way forward into the wild unknown where freedom and self-discovery awaited. With the towering trees as their witnesses, they stepped into the sunlight and began to run again, but this time it was not away from something. It was towards everything life had to offer, hearts lightened by the promise of adventure, side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together. "Stop." Sarah's heart raced as she sprinted down Maplewood Avenue, each step heavy with the weight of her decision. Behind her, the voices of her friends and family turned into an angry mob, a cacophony of disbelief and betrayal that only fueled her determination. Just ahead, an old iron gate loomed, half hidden in the shadows of twisted trees. It had always been a symbol of boundaries, of limits, but now it represented her one chance at freedom. The air buzzed with tension, and every instinct screamed at her to keep running, to push forward toward the unknown. When she reached the gate, she skidded to a halt. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she twisted the cold iron handle. The gate was locked tight, and in that moment, panic clawed at her chest. "No," her voice cracked, fear spurring her on. A shadow appeared beside her. It was Daniel, a familiar face from school, someone she had barely registered in the background of her busy life. But tonight he stepped into her world, tall and solid, a lighthouse in the storm. "Back off, Daniel," she glared at him, the sounds of the angry crowd drawing closer. "I do understand," he insisted, stepping closer. "I felt trapped here too." Anger and frustration swirled inside her, battling with the surprising calm his presence provided. She shot back, her voice low and fierce. Deep down, she recognized that he was brave to confront her like this, to challenge her decision. "More than you think," he said quietly. What was it about his voice? It was steady, confident. She glanced back over her shoulder, the angry faces blurring together in her vision. For the first time, she stopped to really look at him. He had a quiet intensity, something sincere that pulled her in. "Help me," she said, desperation slipping through her tough exterior. Daniel nodded, their shared fear radiating from him like heat. Together, they pushed against the gate, but it wouldn't budge. It was old, rusty, and she could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her. Time was running out, and the shadows of her past loomed larger than ever. She whispered, doubt threatening to swallow her whole. "It's never too late," Daniel replied, his tone a steady beacon. His words struck a chord, igniting a spark of determination. She didn't just want to escape, she wanted to be someone different. With renewed vigor, they shoved against the gate once more. Finally, with a loud creak, it swung open, allowing a sliver of light from the outside world to spill onto the path. "Go," Daniel urged, and they rushed through the opening, leaving the safety of the familiar behind. The moment they stepped into the unknown, a rush of freedom surged through Sarah, mingling with the remnants of fear. The outside world was different, untamed, wild, and filled with possibility. She could hear the distant sounds of the town fading away, replaced by rustling leaves in the cool night air. In that moment, she felt alive. She asked, glancing at Daniel, who looked equally bewildered and exhilarated. "Anywhere but here," he said, and the determination reflected in his eyes echoed her own. As they walked, the path beneath their feet transformed from asphalt to grass, the air shifting from the stale smell of their town to the fresh scent of freedom. The moon illuminated their surroundings, casting enchanting shadows that danced around them. Trees stretched towards the sky like arms reaching for something just out of grasp, and for the first time, Sarah felt the weight of her fears begin to dissipate. She asked quietly, her thoughts still lingering on the people they had left behind. "They'll be okay," Daniel replied, glancing back toward the town one last time. "You can't let them hold you back." His words resonated like a drumbeat in her heart. She breathed, reflecting on the years she had felt small, the way people labeled her, the pressures that suffocated her true self. "Yeah," he said, a smile curling on his lips. "Believe it, you have to." With every step they took, Sarah began to feel the cracks in her armor. "It's okay," he reassured her, stopping to look her in the eye. "Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find who you really are." Something clicked inside her, a realization that washed over her like the morning sun. Sarah had spent years defining herself by other people's opinions, her friends, her family, the town, but she had never taken the time to understand what she truly wanted. As they ventured deeper into the woods, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace settle around them. The rustling leaves whispered secrets, and the cool breeze brushed against her skin like a gentle reminder that she was alive. Every step forward felt like shedding chains, every heavy breath igniting a flicker of hope. They stumbled upon a clearing bathed in moonlight where wildflowers danced in the night. Sarah inhaled deeply, taking in the sweet scent of freedom. "This is beautiful," she said, awed by the magic surrounding them. Daniel said, stepping into the clearing, "There's so much beauty out here." He knelt down to examine a flower, his fingers brushing the petals as if discovering treasure. She watched him, noticing for the first time how his quietness revealed a depth she hadn't taken the time to understand. She asked, curiosity bubbling within her. "Adventure," he replied, looking up with a grin. "Possibility." Feeling emboldened, Sarah stepped closer, her mind racing with the possibilities. "What if we could find them, the dreams? Then let's chase them," Daniel urged, standing up and brushing off his knees. His words echoed with an invitation that felt electrifying. Sarah had always been too cautious, too concerned about conforming to the expectations of her small town. For the first time standing in that moonlit clearing, she wanted to be brave. She murmured, her heart pounding in her chest. "Failure is part of it," he said. With eyes wide open, Sarah gazed into the distance. "You are worth everything," Daniel said, his voice unwavering. His sincerity hit her like a tidal wave, washing away the doubts that had clung to her for so long. "Let's find something amazing then," she whispered, a newfound determination sparking within her heart. As they explored the clearing, laughter bubbled up between them, freeing them from the invisible chains that had once bound them. They shared stories, hopes, and fears as if they were old friends unearthing buried treasures. The connection between them deepened with every laugh, every shared secret, but deep down, uncertainty still lurked. Sarah asked, a hint of caution creeping into her tone. Daniel paused, his brow furrowing. "Back? Why would we want to go back?" "They're theirs and we're ours," he replied, a hint of steel in his voice. "This is your life now." As they continued their journey under the stars, the air of independence and courage enveloped them. Each step was a declaration of their intentions, a promise to themselves that they wouldn't let the past define them. Hours passed as they wandered through the lush expanse of the forest, exploring its hidden corners and marveling at the wonders nature had to offer. They climbed hills, crossed streams, and shared their dreams, illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. And yet in that moment of connection and joy, the shadows of their past were never far away. The Occasionally, faint echoes of reminders lingered, the voices of those left behind, the familiarity of what they had escaped. It was a reminder that their journey was a process, not an instant getaway. "We're not just running, we're growing," Sarah mused, glancing at Daniel as they paused by a calm stream. "Exactly," he said, leaning against a tree. As they stood together, the soft murmur of the water playing against the rocks, she realized she wasn't just escaping the past. She was forging a new path, carving out a future they could embrace. But then a rustling sound echoed through the darkness, snapping her back to the present. Her heart raced as she felt a rush of adrenaline. "Probably just a deer," Daniel reassured her, but it was clear he was unsure. The stillness of the night turned tense, and they exchanged glances, the weight of their earlier fears settling between them. "Maybe we should keep moving," Sarah suggested, her gut twisting with unease. "Right behind you," Daniel said, slipping into step beside her. As they navigated the forest's paths, the shadows loomed larger and each breath became a challenge. The uncertainty surged again as thoughts of being found washed over her like a storm. She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They can try," he replied, a new intensity hardening his expression. The fear crackled between them, but so did the resolve to keep pushing forward. They were bound together by a shared determination to break free and become who they were meant to be. Then the trees began to thin out and a breathtaking view unfolded before them. A valley bathed in the golden light of dawn. Hills rolled like waves and the colors danced in the morning glow. Sarah gasped, the beauty stealing her breath away. "Look," she said, awestruck. "Yeah," Daniel breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. Standing there in the dawn of a new day, she felt the dawn of her own transformation echo inside her. The road ahead was filled with uncertainty, but it also brimmed with endless possibilities. They could create whatever they wanted, free from the constraints of their old lives. And then it dawned on her leaving wasn't just about escaping the shadows of the past. It was about choosing to embrace the light of a new future. "I want this," Sarah declared, her voice filled with conviction. "Then let's do it, together," Daniel said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. With pooled determination, they bounded down the hill toward the valley below, laughter spilling from their lips as they embraced the thrill of their newfound freedom. Together they ran, hand in hand, two souls discovering a world waiting just for them. In that moment, Sarah felt alive. She was no longer a girl running from something. She was a girl running toward everything she could become. And with Daniel beside her, she knew that she could face whatever lay ahead. Together they would create a story that was all their own, a journey of love, courage, and a promise to never look back. Stop. Sarah's heart raced as she darted down Maplewood Avenue, her breath coming out in short, sharp gasps. Behind her, the shouts grew louder, a chorus of voices colliding in confusion and desperation. But she could hardly stop. She had made up her mind. Tonight was the night she left everything behind. With every step, memories of laughter and friendship turned to echoes of judgment and ridicule. This town, with its small, watchful eyes, had never felt like home. It had stifled her dreams, wrapped her in its expectations, and now it was suffocating. She needed to escape. Ahead, the iron gate that marked the end of town loomed, rusted and imposing. It was old, with vines crawling around it like fingers trying to hold her back, but she wouldn't let them. The moon hung bright in the sky, illuminating her path as if urging her forward. Just then, she spotted a figure standing next to the gate. It was Daniel, someone she knew but had always ignored, someone who had lingered in the background of her life, a quiet boy gifted with a certain kind of strength. At that moment, he looked almost like a guardian of the very freedom she sought. He called, his voice breaking through the chaos behind her. It was calm, steady. Panic surged through her as she approached the gate. She shouted, anger flaring to life, fear mingled with frustration. "You don't get it." "I'm not here to stop you," he said, urgency in his eyes. "I'm here to help." She was incredulous, her emotions tearing through her. "You can't possibly understand. You've always just blended into the background." Daniel stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "More than you think. I felt trapped too." The sincerity of his words struck her. In the chaos of her thoughts, she hesitated. He was right there, someone who understood, but could she trust him? She hissed, glancing nervously over her shoulder. The shouts behind her grew closer. His voice was soft yet firm. "I see the courage it takes to leave." With a pounding heart, Sarah looked back at the town, the memories weighing heavily on her. She could almost hear their voices, almost feel the pull of what she was leaving behind, but there was also something light glowing inside her, a flicker of hope ignited by Daniel's presence. "Okay," she breathed out, her voice quietly accepting. The panic settled into a steady determination. Both of them moved toward the gate, hands gripping the cold metal. It resisted at first, creaking ominously, but with a shared grunt of effort, they pushed, the gate swinging open. With that single action, the air felt charged with electricity, the promise of a world waiting just beyond. Daniel urged, stepping through the threshold into the unknown. Sarah followed, leaving the suffocating familiarity of the town behind. The moment she crossed that gate, an overwhelming tide of emotions washed over her: fear, excitement, relief. The air outside was different, sweet, fresh, alive. The moon cast a silver glow over the landscape as they began to walk briskly down the dirt path laid ahead of them. The sounds of the town faded to whispers as they ventured into the quiet embrace of the night. She asked, her eyes searching the dark for answers. "Anywhere but here," Daniel replied, a confident smile flickering across his face. As they walked, the path shifted from familiar asphalt to rugged dirt, each step sending a shiver of exhilaration running through Sarah's bones. She could feel the chains of expectation break away, the weight of the world slowly lifting off her shoulders. Sarah asked, her curiosity prompted by the surreal atmosphere. "I thought you liked this town." Daniel paused, weighing his words carefully. "I used to think that being comfortable meant being safe, but it was suffocating." His words resonated deep within her. They shared an understanding, a shared desire to break free. "Sometimes it feels like we're meant for more, but we're too scared to reach for it," Sarah admitted, looking ahead into the dark. Daniel nodded, his expression serious. The fear of the unknown can be paralyzing. Inspired by his wisdom, she pressed on, realizing that this was her moment to carve out a new identity. This wasn't just about running from something, it was about stepping into something powerful. As they walked deeper into the night, vibrant stars filled the sky, twinkling like promises of dreams waiting to unfold. They trudged further, the silence wrapping around them like a warm blanket. "I've always felt so lost," Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence. "There's so much pressure to fit in, to be what everyone else expects." Daniel glanced at her, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "We're all lost in our own ways, but that's what makes us human." "Is it because everyone back home made it seem like it wasn't okay?" she replied, her voice trembling. "I spent so many hours doubting myself." He nodded, his expression earnest. "You have to learn to let go of that voice, the one that tells you you're not enough." His words soothed the turbulent thoughts in her head. She felt as if a new dawn was breaking upon her heart, illuminating the shadows of doubt. They climbed a small hill, and when they reached the top, they were greeted by a breathtaking view, endless stretches of land, illuminated by moonlight, free and wild. "Wow," she breathed, taking it all in. "It is," Daniel agreed, standing beside her. Standing in the soft night air, Sarah felt a thrill surge through her. With Daniel by her side, she had a sense of safety she had never known. They were now partners in this escape, allies in seeking something greater. But just as she let herself savor that feeling, a noise shattered the tranquility, a distant shout rippling through the night air. Her heart dropped. Daniel urged, grabbing her hand to pull her forward. Fear ignited as they hurried back down the hill. The town was close behind, and with each footfall, Sarah felt the pull of her past trying to drag her back. She could almost hear whispered names, faces of friends turned foes. Those who didn't understand her need for freedom. "Don't look back," Daniel said, his grip tightening on her hand. They raced through the underbrush, ducking low branches and leaping over roots, each pounding heartbeat echoing the determination in their chests. Shadows darted among the trees, and the night grew heavier with every second. She gasped, glancing at him. He pushed onward. Panic surged deep in her chest, propelling her forward, yet doubt whispered cruelly in her ear. "What if they catch us?" Daniel snapped, but the urgency in his voice indicated they both felt the weight of that fear. They pressed on, the paranoia fueling them as they wove through the forest like shadows fleeing the dawn. But finally they reached a clearing where the trees opened like welcoming arms. Moonlight poured in, washing over them like a healing balm. Breathless, they collapsed at the edge of the clearing, safeguarding themselves behind a cluster of bushes. Sarah asked, taking shallow breaths as she tried to calm her racing heart. "Catch your breath," Daniel replied, his voice steadied and calm despite their desperation. They looked around, the sounds of the night now filled with crickets chirping, wind rustling through leaves. For a moment it was peaceful, a pocket of tranquility in a chaotic journey. Sarah asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I do," Daniel said, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her heart race even faster. "You just have to believe it." As he spoke, something inside her shifted. She took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs, igniting a spark of hope within. There was beauty in the unknown, wisdom waiting just out of reach. "We can't stop now," she said firmly, determination returning to her voice. With newfound energy, they stood up, glancing back toward where they had come from. The sounds of the angry crowd had faded, but they couldn't linger. They needed to move beyond what was familiar, embrace the unknown they craved. As they ventured forward, they stumbled upon a hidden path lined with wildflowers that danced in the gentle breeze. Colors exploded in vibrant hues, radiant yellows, purples, and pinks. Felt like magic, a promise of brighter days ahead. Sarah exclaimed, kneeling to touch the soft petals. "It is," Daniel said, joy lighting up his face as he surveyed the beauty around them. For a fleeting moment, they allowed themselves to bask in the serenity of the scene, leaving behind the chaos of their past lives. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, lighting the world in soft gold, it felt like the dawn of something new, a new beginning. "Maybe this was always meant to happen," Sarah mused, spilling her thoughts into the morning light. "Perhaps," Daniel replied, his eyes full of warmth. With every step they took, Sarah felt a sense of liberation. Each stride was a step away from the expectations that had held her captive, each moment a chance to reclaim her identity. The world around them pulsed with new energy, urging them to embrace the future. Hand in hand, they walked forward under the golden rays, the night's fear drifting behind them like shadows. Together, they stepped into their new lives, ready to mold their own destinies. No longer were they just a girl running from town and a boy opening a gate. They were adventurers, seekers on a journey toward who they were always meant to be, unbounded and alive. What lay ahead remained unknown, but Sarah understood one thing: their stories would be intertwined, marked by the strength they had found in one another. Stop! Sarah's heart raced as she darted down Maplewood Avenue, her breath coming out in short, sharp gasps. Behind her, the shouts turned into a chorus of disbelief and betrayal that only fueled her determination. She had made up her mind. Tonight was the night she left everything behind. With every step, memories of laughter and friendship turned to echoes of judgment. This town with its watchful eyes suffocated her dreams. She needed to escape. Ahead, the iron gate loomed, rusted and imposing. Vines crawled around it like fingers trying to keep her in check. The moon hung bright, illuminating her path, urging her forward. Suddenly, she spotted a figure standing next to the gate. It was Daniel, someone she had known but never really seen. To her surprise, he stepped into her world, tall and solid like a guardian of the very freedom she sought. He called, his voice a beacon cutting through the chaos. Panic surged through her as she approached the gate. She shouted, anger boiling inside her. "You don't get it. I'm not here to stop you," he declared, urgency in his eyes. "I'm here to help." She was incredulous, frustration bleeding into her fear. He stepped forward, determination illuminating his face. "More than you think. I felt trapped too." Something shifted inside Sarah. He was right there, someone who understood, but could she trust him? She asked, glancing back at the gathering shadows behind her. "Because I see you," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "I see the courage it takes to leave." Taking a deep breath, Sarah felt the weight of her fears colliding with a flicker of hope ignited by Daniel's presence. "Okay," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Together, they moved toward the gate, hands gripping the cold iron. It resisted at first, creaking ominously, but with shared effort, they pushed. Finally, it swung open, allowing a sliver of light from the outside world to spill onto the path. "Go," Daniel urged, stepping through the threshold. Sarah followed, leaving the security of familiarity behind. An overwhelming rush of emotions washed over her: fear, excitement, relief, all intertwined with the desire for something new. The air outside was different, sweet, fresh, alive. Moonlight painted the landscape as they walked briskly down the dirt path. The sounds of the town faded, replaced by rustling leaves and crickets chirping. Each step felt like breaking free, shedding layers of her past. She asked, her eyes darting around, searching for answers. "Anywhere but here," he replied, a confident smile lighting up his face. As they continued, the path transformed from familiar asphalt to rugged dirt, sending shivers of exhilaration through Sarah. She could feel the chains of expectation shatter, the weight of the world lifting off her shoulders. She asked, her curiosity peeking in the moonlight. "I used to think that being comfortable meant being safe, but it was suffocating," Daniel replied. His words resonated deep within her as they shared this understanding, a desire to break free. "Sometimes it feels like we're meant for more, but we're too scared to reach for it," Sarah admitted, looking ahead into the dark. Daniel nodded, his expression serious. "The fear of the unknown is paralyzing." Inspired, she pressed on, realizing this was her chance to carve out a new identity. This wasn't merely about running from something, it was about stepping into something powerful. As they ventured deeper into the night, vibrant stars filled the sky, twinkling like promises of dreams waiting to unfold. They trudged through the serene atmosphere, the silence wrapped around them like a blanket. "I've always felt so lost," Sarah confessed, her voice trembling. "There's so much pressure to fit in and be what everyone else expects." Daniel glanced at her, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "We're all lost in our own ways, but that's what makes us human." "Is it because everyone back home made it seem like it wasn't okay?" she replied, her voice tightening under the weight of her thoughts. He nodded. "You have to learn to let go of that voice that tells you you're not enough." The warmth of his words soothed the turmoil in her heart. They climbed a small hill, and when they reached the top, an incredible view greeted them, vast stretches of land illuminated by the moonlight, wild and free. "Wow," she breathed, taking it all in. "It is," Daniel agreed, standing beside her. Standing in that serene moment, Sarah felt a thrill surge through her. Daniel's presence gave her a sense of safety she had never known. They were partners in this escape, allies in seeking something greater. But just as she allowed herself to feel that safety, a noise shattered the tranquility, a distant shout rippling through the night air. Panic gripped her heart. Daniel urged, grasping her hand to pull her forward. Terror ignited as they hurried back down the hill. The town was close behind. Each pounding heartbeat echoed the determination inside her. She could almost hear whispered names, faces of friends turned enemies, friends who didn't understand her need for freedom. "Don't look back," Daniel said, gripping her hand tighter. They raced through the underbrush, ducking under low branches and leaping over roots. Adrenaline surged as shadows darted around them. The night grew heavier with every second. She gasped, glancing at him. He shouted. Panic surged deep within her, propelling her forward, yet doubt whispered cruelly in her ear. "What if they catch us?" Daniel urged, but even he seemed to sense the urgency. They pressed on urgently, the paranoia propelling them as they wove through the forest. But finally they reached a clearing where the trees parted, allowing moonlight to wash over them like a balm. Breathless, they collapsed behind a cluster of bushes, their muscles screaming for relief. Sarah asked, shallow breaths escaping her lips as she fought to calm her heart. "Catch your breath," Daniel said, though his expression was still tense. They looked around, the sounds of night filled with crickets chirping and the wind rustling through leaves. Initially it felt peaceful, a pocket of tranquility amidst the chaos. Sarah asked quietly, fighting the doubt echoing in her mind. "I do," he replied, meeting her eyes with a confidence that ignited something deep within her. "You just need to believe it." As he spoke, another realization washed over her. "We can't stop now," she said firmly, determination flooding her voice. With newfound courage, they stood up, glancing back toward the path they had taken. The sounds behind them had faded, but they couldn't linger. They needed to press on, embrace the unknown they craved. Venturing forward, they stumbled upon a hidden path lined with wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. Vibrant colors erupted before them, radiant yellows, purples, and pinks. It felt like magic, a promise of brighter days waiting to unfold. Sarah exclaimed, kneeling to touch the soft petals. "It is," Daniel answered, joy lighting up his face as he surveyed the beauty around them. For a fleeting moment, they allowed themselves to bask in the serenity of the scene, leaving behind the chaos of their past lives. As dawn approached, casting soft golden rays across the landscape, it felt like the birth of something new, a fresh start. Maybe this was always meant to happen, Sarah mused, allowing her thoughts to spill into the morning light. "Perhaps," Daniel replied, a hint of admiration in his voice. With every step they took, Sarah felt a renewed sense of liberation. Each stride was a step away from the expectations that had held her captive and a chance to reclaim her identity. The world around them pulsed with new energy, urging them to embrace their futures. Hand in hand, they strode forward under the golden rays, the night's fears dissipating like shadows at dawn. Together, they stepped into their new lives, ready to shape their destinies. No longer were they just a girl running from town and a boy opening a gate. They were adventurers, seekers on a journey toward who they were meant to be, unbounded and alive. What lay ahead remained a mystery, but Sarah understood one thing: their stories would intertwine, marked by the strength they had found in one another. And with that realization, she felt the weight of her past finally lift, replaced by the promise of extraordinary tomorrows. Sarah shouted, her heart pounding as she sprinted down the cracked pavement of Maplewood Avenue. It was a crisp autumn evening, and behind her, the sounds of laughter turned into angry shouts. Friends were now enemies, convinced she was making a mistake. But Sarah couldn't afford to think twice. She had made up her mind, and tonight she was running away. The world around her blurred, the familiar houses becoming mere shadows as she dashed, fueled by a mix of fear and determination. Deep down, she knew she had to escape the suffocating expectations of a small town, where everyone knew everyone and every misstep felt magnified. Just ahead loomed an old iron gate, partially hidden by vines, a barrier between her past and the freedom she desperately craved. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow, illuminating the path ahead as if urging her to push forward. The voice called from the shadows, cutting through her whirlwind of thoughts. It was Daniel, someone she had grown up with but had never really noticed until now. He stood beside the gate, a figure caught in the interplay of moonlight and shadow. She yelled, barely slowing down. Her chest tightened, the horizon ahead swirling with hope and fear. He replied, urgency coursing through his words. She snapped, anger flaring with every lingering second. His eyes softened as he stepped closer, kind yet firm. "I might not have lived your life, but I can see how trapped you feel." In that moment, something cracked open within her. Could she let him in? Every instinct urged her to keep running, but Daniel's steady gaze anchored her, stirring a flicker of trust. "Fine," she said, breath catching. Daniel nodded, taking hold of the rusted latch. Together they pulled, the metal creaking in protest. The gate resisted, but with a renewed push, it swung open, revealing a world beyond that felt electric. Light spilled into the dark, illuminating the promise of something new. He urged, and they rushed through the opening, leaving the weight of their past behind. As soon as they stepped away from the town, a wave of exhilaration washed over Sarah. The night air was filled with possibility, intoxicating and fresh. She asked, glancing sideways at Daniel, still feeling the adrenaline surging through her. "Anywhere but here," he replied, a smile creeping across his face, igniting a flicker of hope in her heart. As they ventured deeper into the unknown, the path transformed from pavement to rocky terrain, the landscape shifting around them. The woods whispered secrets above, branches weaving together as if creating a tapestry of adventure. Sarah asked, trying to process the release she felt. "Every day," Daniel replied, stepping into the shadows with confidence. "This place, this town, can feel like a cage." With every step, the gravity of her decision began to fade. Here, with Daniel beside her, she felt freer than she had in years. The weight of judgment from the people in town seemed to dissolve into the forest air. Sarah's voice trembled, a flicker of fear surfacing. "They might," Daniel answered, glancing back toward the faint lights of the town, "but they can only chase us if we let them." His words resonated deeply. The realization struck her this was about more than escaping. It was about reshaping her life, reclaiming her narrative. She could finally explore who she truly was. As they walked, sharing snippets of their lives, Sarah felt a connection grow. She asked, eyes glimmering with vulnerability, "Absolutely. It's like I'm a ghost sometimes, floating through the hallways of our school," he replied, his voice laced with sincerity. "But out here," the shadows deepened as they forged ahead, the dense trees enveloping them in darkness. Her heart thumped loudly, matching the rhythm of her thoughts. "Then we face it together," Daniel said, the steadfast nature of his voice calming her anxiety. As the night deepened, they pressed forward, the path unfolding like a story waiting to be discovered. Eventually, they came upon a clearing where the moonlight streamed down, illuminating colorful wildflowers dancing in the cool breeze. Sarah exclaimed, a rush of joy filling her as she knelt to touch the flowers. Daniel knelt beside her, an easy smile illuminating his features. "See." In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the night, Sarah realized she was not just running from something, she was running towards something extraordinary. But as they relaxed in the clearing, an unsettling sound echoed through the trees, a branch snapping, a rustle in the dark. Panic surged within Sarah. She whispered, her heart racing. "Probably just an animal," Daniel said, though the worry lingered in his voice. "Agreed," Daniel replied, standing up and brushing off dirt. They hurried through the underbrush, adrenaline fueling them as fear threatened to swallow Sarah whole. But soon they spotted a pair of trees with thick trunks, their branches stretching outward, an ideal hideaway. They squeezed into the small space between the trees, hearts pounding in sync as they held their breaths. The sounds of the night surrounded them, heavy with tension. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, threaded with fear. "Maybe," he replied quietly, "but we can't let fear dictate our choices. We came this far." As they huddled close, the intimacy of the moment enveloped them. Resting against the rough bark, she could feel Daniel's steady presence. He was there with her, fighting against the fear, pushing her forward. "Thank you for coming with me," Sarah murmured, uncertainty lingering like shadows in her heart. "Thank you for trusting me," he said, looking into her eyes with a sincerity she hadn't expected. Together they listened, feeling the tension in the air. The whispers of the night slipped through the trees, the world outside felt alive and ready to embrace them. Time passed, and as the anxiety began to lift, Sarah looked at Daniel, her heart racing for a different reason now. "Then we will," he replied, determination lighting up his features. In that shared moment, they became more than just two people hiding in the shadows. They transformed into a team, a pair united by ambition and courage, ready to face whatever lay beyond. Suddenly they heard voices, faint and distant but growing ever closer. Sarah urged, adrenaline kicking in again. "Right behind you," Daniel said, slipping out of the makeshift shelter. They darted into the forest once more, hearts racing as the sounds intensified. Daniel urged, his grip on her hand unwavering. Navigating through the darkened paths, Sarah settled her thoughts, forcing herself to trust Daniel. Moving through the trees felt like a surreal dance, each movement fluid yet urgent. Finally, they reached the top of a small hill, panting for breath as they paused to look back at the town. The lights flickered behind them, but there was no sign of pursuit yet. Sarah asked, her voice laced with fear and determination. "Let them try," Daniel replied, standing tall. As daylight began to seep into the sky, painting it in shades of orange and pink, Sarah took a deep breath. She felt an unfamiliar sense of strength coursing through her, wrapping around her heart like a protective barrier. "It feels like we're far away," she said, gazing out at the horizon, the weight of everything they had left behind slipping away like the night itself. "Because we are," Daniel said, his voice steady. "We're not bound by the past anymore." In that golden light, Sarah felt lighter than she had ever felt before. The chains that had held her captive in the town were breaking, shattering into fragments she left behind. "Then we will," he said simply, his eyes glinting with hope. They stood side by side, ready to take the leap into the unknown. With that affirmation, they understood that whatever lay ahead was theirs to shape, free from constraints. With newfound courage, they stepped forward, hand in hand, feeling the freedom pulse through them. The world was vast, filled with potential. Every step became a promise, each heartbeat resonating with the echoes of their dreams. The sun rose higher, flooding the valley in golden light, illuminating their path ahead. In this moment, Sarah felt more than just relief. She felt joy, the kind she had forgotten existed. The town and the people would always be a part of her story, but they no longer held the pen. She was finally ready to write her own tale, bold, free, and full of adventures yet to be faced. And with Daniel beside her, they would carve their way into the future, discovering both themselves and the world together, uncharted territory stretching out before them like a canvas waiting for colors. No more running, just living, embracing everything that was yet to come. Sarah's voice rang out in the stillness of the night as she sprinted down Maplewood Avenue. Her heart raced and adrenaline surged through her veins. Behind her, the chaotic sounds of her old life echoed, angry voices calling her name mixed with disbelief and betrayal. Friends turned into strangers, and each step she took pushed her further away from the life she felt trapped in. Tonight was her night to break free. The chill of early autumn hung in the air as she dashed toward the old iron gate that marked the edge of town. It was a gate she had passed 1,000 times, and yet it now felt charged with possibility and danger. On the other side, she imagined a world of freedom where she could finally breathe. The moon hung low, illuminating her path with a silver glow that pushed her forward. Sarah, a familiar voice cut through the din behind her. Turning slightly, she saw him standing at the gate. Daniel, tall, with messy hair and an ease about him that had always drawn her attention, but she'd never had the chance to really see him until now. She shouted, struggling to maintain her pace. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as she glanced back toward the gathering crowd. "I want to help," he said, urgency filling his voice. "You don't have to do this alone. Why would you care? You've always just been." The same mundane existence she wanted to escape felt suffocating. His expression softened, an intense sincerity in his eyes. "You think I don't understand? I know how it feels to want more." Beneath her urgency, a flicker of something warmed her. "You don't understand my life you've never had to deal with." He took a step closer, a quiet defiance in his stance. "Let me help." For a heart-stopping moment, uncertainty clouded her mind. Could she trust him? But in that moment of chaos, friends, family, expectations closing in on her, his steadiness became a lifeline. "Fine," she said, her voice trembling as she approached the gate. With a determined grunt, they grasped the rusted latch together. It resisted at first, but with a shared effort, they shoved, the groan of old iron echoing in the night. Finally, the gate creaked open, revealing the dark expanse of the world beyond. "Go," Daniel urged, stepping through as she followed. As they crossed into the unknown, Sarah felt a surge of exhilaration and relief washing over her. The weight of the town's expectations lifted momentarily. Maybe she could finally reshape her narrative. She asked breathlessly, glancing at him, the thrill of possibility igniting her heart. "Anywhere but here," he said with a grin, hope flaring in his chest. As they jogged on the dirt path that led away from the gate, the familiar sights of town faded into the distance. The air was alive with the sounds of nature, the rustling leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and it tasted different, fresher. Every breath felt full of potential. She asked, the thought crawling uninvited into her mind. "They might," Daniel replied, glancing back, but his eyes met hers with unwavering confidence. "But we're out here now." It was strange how comfort could come from someone who lived in the same town, sharing a story that felt intertwined. The quiet strength in Daniel's voice made her question everything she believed about herself, the limits imposed by family, friends, and the whispered judgments that had suffocated her for years. They weaved through the dense underbrush, laughter bubbling up as they shared stories of their childhood. Sarah had never considered Daniel to be more than a classmate, an unremarkable face, but now she was beginning to see the depth in his character, the shared longing for something beyond what Maplewood had to offer. He asked, the grin breaking across his face as they walked. "You didn't even flinch when Mr. Thompson confronted us." Sarah chuckled. "I was terrified inside." "That's the thing," he said, his expression turning serious. They pressed on, the thrill of the night mixing with honest conversation. The darkness around them felt welcoming, a canvas for everything they wished to explore. And as they continued deeper into the woods, Sarah's hope began to sprout, mingling with the excitement coursing through her. She mused aloud, glancing sideways at Daniel as they reached a clearing. "Then we will," he said, his tone resolute, "but we have to keep moving." The moonlight lit their path, and for the first time, Sarah felt her spirit untether. The expectations that weighed her down began to fade behind her, replaced by this exhilarating new adventure. But as they found a small brook bubbling nearby, a sudden sound shattered the tranquility, a snapping branch, faint but unmistakable. Fear prickled at the back of Sarah's neck. She whispered, instincts flaring to life. Daniel nodded, his expression alert. "Yes." Without hesitation, they ducked behind the thick brush, hearts racing, breaths held tight. The world around them grew tense, the moments stretching into eternity as they waited. Her mind swirled with doubt, a haunting reminder of the life she had just escaped. Sarah whispered, her chest tightening as fear washed over her. "I don't know," Daniel replied, looking out into the trees, "but if they do, we'll be ready." Sarah turned to look at him, seeing the sincerity behind his words. Here was someone who truly understood her feelings, someone willing to run alongside her to face whatever came next. In that intimate moment, vulnerability hung in the air like a fragile thread connecting them. As the woods fell silent, Daniel's presence provided a strange comfort. They were two souls eagerly seeking adventure, redefining themselves through this journey. She began to see them not just as survivors escaping, but as adventurers discovering the landscape of their potential. Moments passed, and slowly the tension began to dissolve. The night breathed around them, the sounds of nature returning. Finally, peering out from their hiding spot, they saw no one trailing behind. "Looks like the coast is clear," Daniel said, breaking the silence. They stepped out from behind the brush, the cool night air feeling invigorating. With renewed determination, they pressed deeper into the woods, leaving the chaos behind. "We can't go back," Sarah said firmly, a mix of fear and excitement swirling within her. "No, we won't," Daniel replied, his eye alight with determination. They traversed through the landscape, following the path illuminated by the moon. Every step felt like a revelation, the weight of their past giving way to the promise of self-discovery. As the trees began to thin out, they stumbled onto a hill that offered a breathtaking view of the stars twinkling overhead. Sarah exclaimed, her heart rising in her chest. The vast sky was a reminder of how small their town had been, how countless moments waited for them beyond what they knew. It's incredible, Daniel agreed, his voice filled with awe. As they stood together, sharing this moment of wonder, they realized they were embarking on a journey not just of escape, but of exploring who they really wanted to be. No longer confined by the limitations of the town, the world felt infinitely expansive. I want to find out what's out here, Sarah said, a fierce determination setting in. Then let's chase it together, Daniel said, the bond between them strengthening with every passing moment. The night deepened and they ventured onward, hearts and minds open to whatever lay ahead. Time lost meaning as they shared stories, fears, dreams, all the while eluding the past that had chased them out of town. Days turned into nights, and with each sunset they carved their path into the wilderness, seeking adventure in every nook and cranny. They climbed hills, crossed rivers, and explored hidden treasures that came alive in the dark. But even in that freedom, the shadows of doubt sometimes clawed at Sarah's mind. They had escaped the town, yet the questions remained. Could this truly be a new beginning? Was she capable of becoming someone different? One quiet night, as they sat by a flickering campfire, she finally voiced her fears. What if I can't do this? Daniel paused, his gaze steady as he stared into the fire. You are stronger than you think, but what if they catch up with us? What if I go back to feeling Sarah? He interrupted gently. You've already left. You can't let the fear of the past steal your present. You're discovering who you really are out here. In that moment, she realized that running wasn't just about escaping. It was about embracing the journey of self-discovery, the friendships that were forming, and the courage blossoming within her. A newfound determination surged through her. She smiled, feeling an overwhelming wave of gratitude wash over her. Daniel returned her smile, their connection deepening in that vacant night. As the night wrapped around them, a sense of peace settled in, and Sarah thought of all the possibilities that lay ahead. They could explore, foster relationships, and build a life that felt authentic, each moment ripe with less tension and more adventure. With Daniel by her side, the world felt expansive and ready for their exploration. I'm ready to see what's next, she declared, a fire igniting in her heart. In the soft light of the campfire, they made a pact, not just to leave the past behind, but to embrace the future. Together, they would face down the fears lurking at the edges of their new lives. As dawn broke on the horizon, washing the sky in hues of gold, the path before them shimmered with promise. They packed up their camp, ready to step forward into whatever awaited them. No longer running from something, they were running toward their destiny, two souls ready to write a new story, hand in hand. And as they walked into the light, Sarah felt a profound sense of belonging, a sense that she was finally home in her own skin. With each stride they ventured into the unknown, their journey unfolding like a bright tapestry, filled with hope, courage, and the promise of adventure still yet to unfold. Sarah's voice cut through the night, sharp and desperate. She sprinted down Maplewood Avenue, her heart racing like a drum in her chest. Behind her, the loud chatter of her friends turned into angry shouts, rising in confusion and disbelief. Some shouted, others warned, but tonight Sarah was determined. She was running away. The cool night air rushed past her, filling her lungs as she fought through a wave of emotions. Each step took her farther from the life she had known, from a suffocating existence where every misstep was magnified by the watchful eyes of her small town. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. Ahead, a familiar landmark appeared, the old iron gate that marked the town's boundary, a barrier that had always felt ominous, but now it held the promise of escape. Vines twisted around its rusted hinges, whispering secrets of the forgotten paths that lay beyond. The moon bathed it in a silvery glow, casting beautiful shadows that beckoned her forward. Sarah, a voice called out, breaking through the noise of her racing heart. It was Daniel, a figure silhouetted against the moonlight. He was someone she had grown up with but barely knew, always lingering at the edges of her consciousness, a silent observer in a crowded room. She panted, slowing just enough to catch her breath, anger mixing with surprise, the despair lurking in her chest mixed with the thrill of breaking free. Daniel stepped closer, concern etched in his features. She scoffed, the bitterness seeping through. You've never even noticed me before tonight. Because I see you, he replied, his voice surprisingly steady. I see how trapped you feel, and I don't want you to go through this alone. The sincerity in his eyes held her for a moment, made her hesitate. Could she trust him? Her mind raced, grappling with the weight of fear and the flicker of hope ignited by his presence. Fine, she finally said, taking a deep breath. Together they approached the gate. Daniel took hold of the cold, rusted latch. With a deep inhale, they pushed against the heavy gate, the old metal groaning in protest. Finally, with a loud creak, it swung open, allowing a beam of moonlight to spill into the darkness beyond. Go, Daniel urged. Without hesitation, she stepped through the threshold, chasing the rush of freedom. The moment she crossed that gate, an intoxicating wave washed over her, fear, excitement, relief, all tangled together. Sarah asked, glancing at him, a mix of exhilaration and confusion flooding her heart. Anywhere but here, he replied with a grin that ignited a flicker of hope. As they ran down the dirt path leading away from the town, the sounds of hostility began to fade, replaced by the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Each step felt liberating, the air filled with new possibilities. Sarah asked, her breath quickening as dread flickered at the edges of her mind. They might, Daniel confessed, glancing back, but they can only catch us if we let them. The gravity of his words anchored her. She wasn't just fleeing, she was stepping into a new world where she could shape her own story. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the shadows grew and the moonlight danced among the trees. Sarah caught glimpses of Daniel, his determination, confidence, and the way he moved as if he belonged to this untamed wilderness. She asked, trying to form a connection beyond the chaos. "Not really," he said, shaking his head. A shared understanding flickered in the air between them. Her own feelings echoed within him, and for the first time in ages, she felt truly seen. "Tonight feels different," Sarah remarked, her voice tinged with wonder. "Exactly, we're choosing our own path," Daniel said, excitement lighting up his voice. They pressed on, moving further from the past. But then a rustle in the bushes nearby stopped them short. Her heart plummeted. "Stay low," Daniel instructed, eyeing the dense undergrowth. They pressed into the shadows as a figure emerged from the trees. "It's probably just my imagination," she whispered, trying to calm her frayed nerves, but Daniel's expression remained serious. Time hung thick around them, the cool air vibrating with tension. Just as an eerie silence settled, they heard voices, familiar voices drifting through the night. Panic surged through Sarah's veins. The people from town were coming, desperate to drag her back. She whispered, fear clawing at her throat. "I don't know, but if we don't move, we'll find out," Daniel murmured. They darted deeper into the woods, adrenaline coursing through their bodies. Every rustle of leaves sent her heart racing, every shadow could be an enemy. The sensation of being hunted had never felt so real. Sarah gasped, trying to keep pace. Daniel called back, leading the way through the thick brush. They ran as fast as they could, weaving through the trees, branches snapping in their wake. Sarah urged, glancing desperately for a place to duck low. Daniel grunted. With every footfall, fear mixed with determination. They had to escape, had to outrun the memories that haunted them. In that fraught moment, Sarah felt an unexpected rush of empowerment. Here was someone beside her, someone willing to face the unknown together. As they climbed a small hill, she took a second to look back at the fading lights of her old life. The distant sounds of pursuit echoed behind them, but as they reached the top, the sky opened up before them, a horizon that felt endless. Sarah exclaimed, the view taking her breath away. "It is," Daniel said, breathless beside her. With the moon casting a gentle light over the sprawling landscape, Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. Could they really be free? Could she finally become the person she had always dreamed of being? But the tranquility was shattered as a shout rang out in the distance, echoing through the trees. Sarah, her heart sank. "We have to keep going," Daniel urged, pulling her to the edge of the hill. "We're nearly at the edge of the woods," she echoed, uncertainty creeping back in. "And then what?" Daniel turned to her, determination etched on his face. "No, not forever. Just until we find our way, you have to trust me." She looked into his eyes and saw the conviction shining back, a promise of something greater. He was right. If they stopped now, if she let fear control her, she would be stuck forever. "Okay," she whispered. They charged down the hillside, the thrill of liberation mingling with the heavy thudding of their hearts, yet every step felt like a cacophony in the silence of the woods. The sound of their footsteps echoed, chasing away the tranquility that had surrounded them. As they reached the edge of the trees, the moon slipped behind a cloud, plunging them into darkness. The sudden change brought a rush of panic. Sarah gasped, squinting into the shadows. Daniel assured her, pointing toward the dim light filtering through the branches. With renewed purpose, they rushed toward it, heartbeats synchronizing in urgency. But just as they broke free from the underbrush, a harsh beam of light swept across their path. A voice boomed from behind the light. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, panic igniting once more. They had come so far only to be trapped at the edge of freedom. Daniel shouted, pulling her along. Trust lived in her veins as they fled past the light, hearts racing with the thrill of imminent danger. But the blaring shout following them made her legs feel heavier, the weight of hopelessness creeping back in. Daniel cried as they turned a corner. The road twisted into darkness, and far ahead, headlights approached. A vehicle swung into view, illuminating the night, growing closer and closer. They couldn't be caught now, not with freedom just steps away. Daniel shouted, leading her down the gravel trail that twisted alongside the road. They dashed into the shadows, but as they reached a small embankment, Sarah stumbled. The ground shifted beneath her feet, and she lost her balance, falling hard. Daniel yelled, reaching for her, but before he could grab her, she tumbled down the embankment, hitting the ground hard. She heard him shout, his voice echoing in the dark as the sound of the vehicle got louder, headlights piercing through the night. With shaking hands, she pushed herself up, heart racing. Panic flooded her system as she glanced back at the approaching headlights. It felt like a scene from a movie. Would this be the moment where everything came crashing down? Daniel urged, extending his hand down to her. She took it and pulled herself up, adrenaline igniting every cell in her body. But as they raced to the edge of the embankment, the headlights swung closer, illuminating their path in the scariest way possible. Daniel shouted, and they scrambled behind a thick cluster of trees just as the vehicle screeched to a stop. Aces behind the wheel were familiar, and dread washed over her. It was her friends, the very people who had once laughed with her, now desperately searching for her. Sarah, one of them, shouted, the fear palpable in their voice. Every part of her body screamed at her to run, but they were too close now, their shouts pulling her back, keeping her trapped in the moment. Daniel held tightly onto her arm, his grip firm against the chaos. "We can't stay here forever," he whispered, panic lacing his words. "I know," she replied, her heart pounding, but she couldn't move. All she could think about was what they would say if they found her here, running from everything she had known. But as the headlights moved, illuminating the shadows of the trees, she felt the ground shift under her feet again. "What if they pull me back?" Daniel said, urgency buzzing between them. With a deep breath, Sarah realized she had been fighting for so long, fighting against her life, running from expectations. Maybe this was the moment where she had to choose to fight for her own freedom instead of letting it slip away. When she finally looked up, she noticed the way the moonlight broke through the trees, almost as if it was illuminating a path forward. She could feel the weight of fear begin to dissipate, replaced by unyielding resolve. Daniel barked, and with that, they made a dash for the road, hearts pounding as freedom hung just within reach. But as they ran headlong into the night, the headlights grew brighter behind them, and the sound of footsteps echoed against the pavement, pulling her back. Would this really be the end of the journey she'd barely begun? Daniel shouted, but the fear pressed on her heart like a stone. And as they burst onto the road, everything felt suspended in a moment of reckoning. At that moment, Sarah understood she was standing at a crossroads, not just of her physical location, but of her life and future decisions. Would she allow herself to be pulled back into a life of expectations? Or would she push forward hand in hand with Daniel, ready to fight for the story she wanted to create? The faint echoes of her old life called to her through the night. But under the glaring light of those headlights, Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the freedom pulse in her veins like wildfire. It was time to decide. And as they ran against the darkness, that decision loomed ahead like an unanswered question, leaving the night echoing with possibilities hanging in the air, the path to freedom unfurling ahead and waiting to be claimed.